What if everything you thought you knew about Jesus is just the doorway to a larger spiritual truth? Edgar Cayce, often called America's most documented psychic, gave over 14,000 trance readings. In those sessions, he described a Jesus whose life, training, and message challenge mainstream assumptions. Missing years abroad, a path through initiatory schools, teachings on reincarnation, and a practical method for healing that anyone can begin to practice. Cayce said he accessed the Akashic Records, a universal memory of souls, and from that vantage he offered a different frame. Jesus not only as Redeemer, but as Wayshower, a perfected consciousness demonstrating what the human soul can become. Let's jump into this. In Reading 5749-14, 1941. In Cayce's material, the silent years in the Gospels aren't blank at all. He describes Jesus, often under the name Jeshua, studying and traveling for 17 years across India, Egypt, and Persia before his public ministry. The purpose wasn't tourism or novelty, it was apprenticeship. In this telling, the young Jesus trained with teachers versed in meditation, breath, and prayer disciplines, energy and healing, and the architecture of consciousness. He learned to quiet the personality so that divine mind could move through without obstruction. What makes this picture distinctive is the contrast Cayce draws with some Eastern renunciate ideals, where certain schools spoke primarily of withdrawing from the world. Cayce says Jesus would later press the opposite: transform matter through love. Don't flee the field, till it, heal it, raise it. In Reading 2067-1, Cayce revealed that Jesus explicitly taught reincarnation. But while Eastern religions saw it as a cycle of suffering to escape, Jesus framed it as God's gift of unlimited opportunities to perfect the soul. In Reading 5749-8, Cayce said each lifetime was a chance to grow closer to perfect love, a message later suppressed by church councils. Here is one of Cayce's most controversial claims: that Jesus taught a form of reincarnation, not as a sentence to endless return, but as a merciful curriculum. Souls, he said, take multiple lives to learn, refine, and finally express divine love without distortion. In this view, born again isn't a single moment. It's the ongoing awakening to who we really are across lifetimes. Cayce's framing shifts the tone from fear to opportunity. Each lifetime is another opening to grow in patience, courage, compassion. The judgment becomes less a courtroom and more a mirror. What we cannot love yet returns to us to be loved into wholeness. In Reading 262-103, Cayce explained that Jesus understood illness as a spiritual imbalance, healed by restoring harmony with divine love. Cayce himself demonstrated this principle in thousands of medical readings. In Reading 3124-2, a woman with terminal cancer was guided to transform fear into faith, shift her diet, and pray daily. Within 6 months, no cancer could be found. Cayce's medical readings parallel his portrait of Jesus. Illness, he said, often reflects disharmony, emotional conflicts, hardened attitudes, or long-held fear. Healing begins when consciousness realigns. Forgiveness softens the body's armor. Prayer steadies the nervous system. Diet and rest support the repair that reconciliation makes possible. In this light, Jesus' healings aren't violations of nature, but demonstrations of higher law. What happens when a mind truly surrendered to love meets a body ready to respond? Pause and consider this. If love is not a feeling but a force, a coherent field, then practices that increase coherence, meditation, truthful speech, service, gratitude, make healing more likely, not less. According to Reading 2067-11, Jesus' soul was nurtured in the Essene community, a mystical Jewish sect living near the Dead Sea. The Essenes prepared Mary from early childhood to fulfill her mission. Reading 1472-1 says she was trained in meditation, prayer and purity beginning at age 4, preparing her to conceive and raise the Christ child. So, that said, Cayce's readings also place Jesus among the Essenes, a mystically inclined Jewish community along the Dead Sea. In that setting, tradition and prophecy blended with rigorous spiritual practice. Cayce paints a picture in which Mary was carefully prepared from childhood, trained in purity of heart, devotion and prayer, to carry a soul of unusual luminosity. In parallel, he describes Jesus as formed by teachers who preserved ancient wisdom and initiatory knowledge, not to replace Torah, but to fulfill it at a deeper octave. In this telling, nothing is accidental. Readiness meets timing, and a long story converges in one life. Another of Cayce's boldest themes is pre-existence. He presents Jesus as a soul whose earlier lives steadily refined capacity, learning to wield power without pride, knowledge without coldness, purity without withdrawal. By the time of the Nativity, the vessel was prepared. Not omniscience dropped from the sky, but mastery ripened through experience. Cayce revealed in Reading 364-5 that Jesus' soul had lived before as Adam, the first human, and later as Enoch, who walked with God and was taken without dying. These incarnations were steps in a long soul journey preparing for the final mission as Jesus the Christ. When he declared, "Before Abraham was, I am," Reading 364-15, it reflected direct memory of his soul's eternal journey. This gives new meaning to lines like, "Before Abraham was, I am." In Cayce's view, such sayings gesture to memory, awareness of the soul's long arc, and to the presence at the core of all becoming. According to Reading 294-150, Jesus underwent initiation in the Great Pyramid of Egypt. In Reading 5748-6, Cayce explained that the pyramid was not simply a tomb, but a temple of initiation. There, Jesus experienced symbolic death and resurrection, preparing him for the mission in Jerusalem. He directly encountered the truth that consciousness survives physical death. Cayce frequently cites Egypt, and the Great Pyramid in particular, not merely as a tomb complex, but as a temple of initiation, where candidates symbolically died and rose into a new consciousness. In that setting, Jesus is said to have encountered teachings about the soul's post-mortem journey and to have rehearsed inwardly the passage from fear to surrender. The point wasn't spectacle, it was integration, a body and mind so attuned to spirit that even death becomes a doorway, not a wall. If true, this would explain the unshakable authority with which Jesus later speaks of life beyond death, not as theory, but as lived knowledge. In Reading 365-31, Cayce explained that when Jesus spoke of the kingdom of heaven, he meant a state of consciousness available here and now. His parables, such as the prodigal son, were not only moral stories, but encoded teachings about the soul's long journey away from and back to God through lifetimes of growth. Cayce's portrait reframes Jesus' core message. The kingdom of heaven, he says, isn't a distant destination, it's a state of consciousness, the condition of a heart aligned with divine will. The parables, then, aren't just moral tales, they are practice manuals. The prodigal son becomes the soul's arc, leaving the source, tasting distance, and then returning home, wiser, humbler, fuller. The miracles become illustrations of spiritual law in action. As consciousness aligns with love, matter yields, blindness becomes sight, paralysis becomes movement, scarcity becomes enough. In this key, Jesus is not only Saviour to be worshipped, but teacher to be followed, not as an idol, but as a model. In reading 262-14, Cayce explained that Jesus did not pray to an external God in the sky. His prayers were attunements to the divine presence within. Our Father who art in heaven was an acknowledgement of the divine spark within all souls. When he prayed, "Not my will but thine be done," reading 281-41, he aligned his human will with his higher self. In Cayce's lens, Jesus' prayer life isn't pleading to a far-off throne. It's attunement, tuning the instrument until divine music can play through it. Our Father recognizes presence, both transcendent and within. "Not my will, but thine," is the yielding of the personality to the soul's knowing, the small steering wheel handed to the deeper captain. This is the secret of power Cayce highlights. The less the ego resists, the more the Christ consciousness, the pattern of divine sonship, can move unhindered. So, perhaps the most expansive statement in Cayce's material is this: Christ is not only a name, it's a level of consciousness. Jesus is the Christ because he fully embodied it. But the invitation is universal. Learn what he learned, do what he did, become what he became, each after our measure. Greater works than these shall you do becomes less hyperbole and more prophecy of human maturation. Cayce foresees a time when many souls awaken to this pattern together, a kind of spiritual renaissance where healing, direct guidance, and intuitive communion are recognized as natural capacities cultivated with humility and love. The greatest revelation of Cayce's readings is this: Jesus' message was never about blind belief. In reading 262-125, Cayce explained that Jesus' mission was to awaken each soul to its divine nature. Christ consciousness is not reserved for one. It is the destiny of all. Through meditation, prayer, dream study, forgiveness, and above all love, each of us begins to live the same path he demonstrated. Cayce's followers often point to historical turns, councils, doctrinal codifications, institutional consolidations to explain why themes like reincarnation, inner illumination, or practical mysticism faded from mainstream theology. Whether or not one accepts that specific history, Cayce's through line is clear. When power centralizes, teachings that decentralize power, direct access to God, personal responsibility, multiple lifetime growth, tend to be minimized. In that light, the Comforter, or Holy Spirit, is not a distant third person alone, but the living current of Christ consciousness, available to guide any sincere heart back to the center. Cayce's practical spirituality. Cayce emphasizes that the way is doable and daily. Sit in quiet each day. Breathe gently. Let the mind grow still. Not to escape the world, but to become a clearer channel within it. Pray as attunement. God is love. Repeat until the body softens and the breath deepens, and let the heart catch up with the words. Watch your dreams. In Cayce's framework, the soul uses dreams to tutor the waking self. Keep a notebook. Look for patterns of fear, forgiveness, guidance. Practice unconditional love in small, concrete acts. Forgive. Tell the truth kindly. Share what you have. In Cayce's view, love is the law under which all other laws harmonize. Align your work and relationships with conscience. When love leads, vitality tends to follow. The claim isn't that effort earns grace. It's that effort makes room for grace to act. In Reading 3976-29, Cayce revealed that Jesus foresaw an age when millions would awaken to Christ consciousness at once. This would bring about a global spiritual renaissance where healing, telepathy, reincarnation, and divine communication would be understood as natural human abilities. This is what Jesus meant by "Greater works than these shall you do." He envisioned humanity stepping into its shared divinity, not someday in heaven, but here on earth. Imagine that. Entire communities of awakened souls co-creating a world shaped by love, healing, and spiritual awareness. Cayce said, "This age is not far off." Cayce's Jesus does not shrink the gospel. He widens it. From mere belief about a figure to participation in a pattern. The cross remains central, but as the supreme act of love through suffering that transfigures the very energies that harm us. Resurrection remains central, but as a sign that life is stronger than death, and that consciousness is not capped by a tomb. For traditionalists, this may challenge doctrine. For seekers, it offers a bridge. The historical Jesus and the mystical Christ held together, not in competition, but in completion. A closing invitation for you. If Cayce's portrait holds any truth, then the invitation is startling and simple. Don't stop at admiring Jesus, apprentice to him. Pray as he prayed, to align, not to bargain. Love as he loved, concretely, sacrificially, without scoreboard. Heal where you can, with presence, listening, and the courage to forgive. Treat your days as the very field where Spirit would like to work through you. The claim is not that you are asked to become someone else, it's that you are asked to become fully yourself, the self in whom God delights and through whom love can move unhindered.